Hey there, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, a podcast for paradigm changers. Each week I speak with another influential leader who's changing the conversation for their audience, their industry, and this world. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the show.
Nadia Bolz-Weber, thank you for being here. I want to start by just sharing a little bit about your history in terms of bio-y kind of stuff. And then I have a question I start all of these with, and we can dive in from there. Cool. So I know you are an ordained Lutheran pastor. You founded the House for All Sinners and Saints in Denver. You have a pretty fun, I don't know if that's the right word, podcast called the Confessional. Author of a bunch of great books, New York Times bestsellers, Pastrix, Cranky Beautiful, Faith of a Sinner and Saint, Accidental Saints, Finding God in All the Wrong People, Shameless, Sexual Reformation. Here's what I'm really most excited about having you on this show around is you strike me as somebody who is an quote unquote unlikely candidate into your calling. And perhaps that's the exact reason you were called. I wonder if you can start by telling us a defining moment in your life that really set the trajectory for your path, set you on this journey.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. This is the kind of stuff I love talking about. So for me, I was raised really very conservative, fundamentalist Christian, and for reasons of self-preservation, had to leave that behind and spent about 10 years outside of Christianity, long enough to heal, enough to come back on my own terms type of thing. But when I came back, it was because my ex-husband was a Lutheran seminary student when I met him. So he introduced me to Lutheran theology and liturgy and sacraments and whatnot. And I really found it really transformative. And I really loved Lutheran theology. It's very distinct. And we can go into that later if you want. But what happened was, here I am, not a churchy person at all, recovering alcoholic, all these tattoos, swear like a truck driver. There's like not one thing about me like that signals Lutheran pastor. Yeah. And so before I'd ever gone to seminary, when I was just trying to get my college degree in my mid-30s, I'd been sober for 10, 12 years at this point. And there was a AA meeting I was a regular at that had a friend of mine who was a regular, who was also recovering alcoholic, and we had done stand-up together in the 90s, and he was just brilliant, this guy named PJ. And but PJ really struggled with mental health as well as addiction, and he fought the good fight, but in the end he did not win the good fight. And so when PJ died by suicide, my friend called me to tell me, and then several of my friends said, well, you could do the funeral, right? Now, literally, I had not been to seminary. I was just the only religious person in my friend group. Like, I was the only one who went to church out of all of our friends. And so they're like, well, then you do the funeral.
Yeah, by proxy.
And that's right. And so I'd already been asked in my life 2 or 3 times before that point to do people's weddings. Not even religious weddings, like kind of heathen weddings. But for some reason, people kept asking me to hold that office in a way in their lives. Yeah. And so I was doing the eulogy at PJ's funeral, and I'm standing, it was at the Comedy Works in downtown Denver. And I look out in the audience, and it was like comics and academics and queers and recovering alcoholics. And they're in so much pain, and they clearly don't know what to do. And I thought, oh man, these people need a pastor. And then I went, oh shit, I think that might be me. Like, what? I
love that.
And so I kind of tucked that away because it was it was a few years until I went to seminary. But when I was in seminary, I knew pretty quickly that I was on a very particular path, that I didn't have a sort of generic call to ministry. I really felt a call to be a pastor to my people, because like I found Lutheran theology and liturgy and sacraments to be like really transformative, but I'd look around Lutheran churches, no one looked like me. My friends are not going to those churches, which isn't to say those churches are doing something wrong. It's just I have to culturally commute from who I am to who that church is. And I was like, what if people didn't have to do that? Like, what if my friends didn't have to do that? So my call to ministry was very particular, that I was called to start a church and to do it to where the DNA of the church got to be established in a particular cultural context that the church usually isn't present in. So that's what I did.
I love that question. What if they didn't have to culturally commute?
Right.
One of the questions that I use is like, what doesn't exist in the world because you haven't yet created it?
Well, that's a horrible question. That's like a huge setup.
It is. It is.
As somebody who keeps making shit, that feels like while I'm creating it, trying to make it happen feels nearly fatal. That's not a nice question.
It's true, but that question you asked, like, what if they didn't have to culturally commute? That's that foundational question.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, look, starting a church in the urban core amongst a heavily cynical population from scratch by yourself, honest to God, it was
good fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of freedom. It was a lot of creativity. I nearly burn out so many times. So many feelings of futility and frustration. And like, I've tried all the things. I'm almost recklessly resourceful. I mean, in the sense that, like, I don't give up until there is literally nothing I can do. And it takes a long time for me to get to there's nothing else I can do point, right? Well, that can be a useful little superpower, to have such a strong will that you can apply it with full force into creating something. But there's a detriment to it. There's a dark side to it as well. There can be collateral damage to being that kind of person.
How have you danced with that? Because a lot of the folks that I work with are, very driven, very resourceful.
Yeah.
Before you know it, your calling can rob you of your life.
For sure. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, here's the irony about all of it. One conversation I'm really interested in that I don't hear people talking about is, what is the nature of and the work of and the responsibility of charisma? Because it takes personal charisma to do something like start a church. If you're not charismatic, it won't work. You might like the idea of yourself as a church planter, but if you don't have a history of being like, hey guys, let's do this, and all the people going, yeah, okay, and them doing it, like people wanting to be around you, hang out with you, get excited by your ideas. If you don't have that innately, you cannot create it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something kind of magic there. Now, there's certain work in the world you can't do without charisma. And yet I never hear people talk about what is the responsible use of it.
So good.
Right. Because that's what I fucked up. Maybe not. I don't know that I don't know who else might say it that way, looking back on it. I didn't know how to be responsible with it. Yeah. And there were people who were hurt by that. I was hurt by that. It was useful for getting the church started, but it took me a while to recognize my effect on people and to be very careful with it.
Yeah.
Because being the person in the room that everybody wants to hear from, that people lean into, that, has the most power in the room, in a sense, that can be useful, but you have to be responsible with it. And so I went I was just self-will run riot, as we say in AA. Like I was all in and just the force of my will starting this church. I worked 60, 70 hours a week. I was very resourceful. I had coffee with everyone in Denver like twice, trying to get this thing going. And I don't know how else it could have started. And yet, after the first few years, when I started to experience the way in which that can be harmful, I took the cape off after that. I didn't function. I can say for all the things I got wrong, one thing is that once I realized that's what was happening and that there was this one thing in the community that I was sure we had to make work in order for the whole church to function. I won't get into what it was, but I was so focused on we had to be in this one location. We had to be in this one building. And I was so sure of myself. And I didn't let any other data, any other opinion, any other wisdom enter in, right? I was absolutely sure. And I can make a case. I'm persuasive. So all I have to do is make my case and magically other people agree with me. So I must be right. No, you're just good at making a case. That's not the same as being right. Yeah. People agreeing with you because you're charismatic and you're good at making a case is not the same as being right.
My business manager always accuses me of that. She's like, you can make a case for anything, Jeffrey. So yeah, it's something I think that, like you said, can be super powerful in leadership and has a really dark side.
It has a destructive side. And so when some things kind of crashed and burned, and the thing I was sure that I wanted to fight to make happen got completely taken away, wasn't even a possibility anymore. We were forced to move locations. It was the best thing that could have happened for the church. I was wrong. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I tried to remain sufficiently suspicious of myself because I became much more collaborative in my leadership. Now, Lutheran pastors can kind of call the shots in a way. It's not like Presbyterian, the polity is different, in different denominations. But I had a much more collaborative form of leadership. I would bring an idea to the leadership and I go, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Here's why. I could be wrong. What do you guys think? Either nix it or make it better, this idea, know?
Yeah.
And it was incredible after that.
What changed for you doing it that way, right? Because we talked about like nearly burning out, nearly killing yourself in the process.
Yeah.
What changed for you doing it that
way? It took some of the. Sometimes it was hard because it meant that I might really want something that they decided to not do. So it took it. The thing they don't tell you is that all of the things that make it possible for all of your traits that make it possible for you to start a church, you have to die to every single one of those in order for the church to actually live after you started it. That's what they don't tell you. Either you figure that out or you hurt the church to the point that it can't recover. I'll tell you this. If you visited House for All Sinners and Saints when I was still there, you might be shocked at how little I was up front. So I arranged this whole thing so that it wasn't a cult of personality because I kind of saw what effect that had. And so one of the things I am the most proud of as a leader is that the church I founded is doing really well without me.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's a really great gift.
But it was very intentional. I mean, it was important to me that church not have founder syndrome. And so from the beginning, I talked about my departure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know why? Is because what happened was it was such a beautiful gift of the Spirit is that I think I was like a year into the church when I met these two people, Sarah Miles and Paul Fromberg. And they were the second generation of leadership for a really funky church Episcopal church in San Francisco. They had taken over from the founders.
Yeah.
And those founders were amazing, but they stayed too long.
Yeah.
And so I had a close relationship, like on the phone a couple times a week with these people who were a constant cautionary tale for what happens when founders stay too long. And if I wouldn't have intuited all of that had I not had those relationships.
Yeah. I was part of a church with a founder that I'm like, yep, when that guy leaves, that thing's dust.
And was it? Did it?
He hasn't left yet.
Oh,
yeah. But I will say I've seen the beginnings of the bricks crumbling.
Yeah. It's too bad. I think we can be coaching our leaders better. Like we could be of service to people who have those weird little gifts like that. We could be of service to them by, some really good coaching, I think. I mean, I'll tell you what we did is that what happened was I was like a staff of one running this church, and increasingly had a public ministry as well.
Yeah.
And thank God my bishop, Jim Gonya, is just simply one of the best men I've ever known. And he is not threatened by having a famous pastor who he's the bishop of. Yep. He wrote my recommendation to start seminary to begin with when he was just a parish pastor, right before he was my bishop. So he knows me really well and really believes in my work. He calls me and he'll be like, "How's your soul?" Like he checks in on me. Yeah. But he said, "Look, Nadia, we need to get another person in there because you can't do both things." And I think both things are important. So we found this Episcopal priest named Reagan Umber, who actually, ironically, his mentor was Paul Fromberg. So he went to seminary and came up through St. Gregory of Nyssa, our sister church. Of course. Yeah. And so I had preached at Paul Fromberg's installation as the rector at St. Gregory's. And eventually Paul flew out, preached at my final service at House for All Sinners and Saints. But Reagan and I worked side by side for 3.5 years before I left. Yes. And as soon as he came on, I went part-time. And as soon as he came on, I deferred to him. People saw how much I respected him. Eventually they saw how much we loved each other. And so by the time I left, nobody replaced me. They already had this pastor they loved who just stepped into a slightly different role, but in some ways not, like he gave the state of the house report months after he came at the yearly meeting, not me. So it ended up being, I think, pretty key in making it work. So
sounds like it to me. Curious about something you shared just a little bit earlier, though. That piece about dying to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of the folks that listen to this have a message for the world, right? They are called to be thought leaders of some sort, be a public figure. They may or may not found a community around their work.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how you would think about that idea of dying to oneself as you grow for any of us, whether we're founding a church, running a community, or out in the world sharing our work and our message.
Well, all I know is my own story. So like,
yeah,
I didn't, to be honest, I didn't aspire to be where I am today. There, in so many ways, it just happened to me. My career is a result of people going, "Hey, you should do that. You want to do this?" And me being like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
I mean, not my church. My church, that was self-will. That was like direction of the will, make this happen. But the rest of it, I mean, I didn't have to try to figure out how to get a literary agent or even a publisher. Like a publisher came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to write this book." So much of my stuff, I didn't even have a website for years until my friends were like, "You should have a website." I'm like, "You don't think that's weird?" They're like, "No, it's weird you don't have one." Yep. And so even like when I was trying to figure out how to do this stage of my career, I talked to this other woman, Jen Hatmaker's a businessman, and she goes, "Well, what's your email list at?" And I'm like, "My what?" 10 years of talking to tens of thousands of people all over the world, 3 New York Times bestsellers. Not only did I not have an email list, I didn't know I was supposed to. So there's a way in which the thing that I try to talk to people about listening to is what I call an external call. In the Lutheran Church, I serve on my Synods candidacy committee. So I'm walking through discernment questions and vocation questions with seminarians all the time. And so I love these conversations, but we talk about internal call and external call. So internal call is this like, I have this feeling that I should do this, or I think God is calling me, or it feels to me, it's all inside.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that's like not useful, but I find the usefulness of that to be very limited, if I'm honest, because human beings are very skilled at a million ways of self-justifying things, of wishful thinking, of bullshitting ourselves. You know what I mean? So like, is it like God? Is it a form of spiritual self-flattery? Is it that you love the idea of yourself as this thing, and so therefore God must be calling you to it when it's just an idea? You're like, I don't know, like not that reliable. I like listening to external call. Where have people in your life already sort of started putting you in that position?
Yeah.
Where is the world calling you into this? By these opportunities, by certain conversations you're having with people, by requests that are coming in, like, hey, could you show up for this thing?
Yeah.
How is the world identifying? Because there's a lot right now, being an influencer is like people's dream, right? And yet, when that's the sort of goal and that's what you're striving for, that just feels very odd. Instead of recognizing, oh, I think I already have some influence. How do I leverage that in a beautiful way, or in a good way, at least? So I try and have people listen to the external call a little more.
You know, one of the things, when I started speaking and teaching and whatnot, one of the things I started noticing is I'd get off stage, and there'd be the regular people saying hello and whatnot, and then there'd be like a few lurkers, right, who'd wait until folks left a bit, and they'd come up to me and they go, hey, you were getting stuff up there, weren't you? Like, yeah. They're like, no, but like you were hearing a voice, you were getting stuff. Like, you were saying stuff you weren't planning to talk about before you got on stage, right? And I'd be like, yeah, right. And eventually they'd go, how'd you do that? And what I realized eventually they were asking is like, how do I listen to God's voice, or the divine's voice, or my soul, or whatever you want to call it?
Sure.
How do I listen to that voice in real time and weave it into more of my everyday life and leadership? Right? Now, I wouldn't have ever known, like, oh, that's what I'm going to help people with. You know,
right.
An external call. I started to notice, gosh, time after time after time after time, when I step off stage, there's always a couple people waiting with some version of that question.
Boy, dude, I avoid the lurkers because I always find them to be the least mentally healthy people in the room. They're always like waiting until you have no excuse to not pay exclusive attention to them. And I'm like, oh, never am I available for that.
There is that version.
But that's me. I mean, that's how people react to me, you know. But yeah. I mean, I don't know. The thing about like dying to certain parts of yourself. I mean, I think there's sometimes we can get tricked, like divinely tricked into shit. You know? Yeah. Like, oh yeah. Like the spirit is sort of nudging us, and we think it's because, boy, if I go that direction, I bet my parents will finally respect me. Or if I go that direction, I bet, you know, X will happen in my life. And so that's what gets you to do that. And when in the end, then you realize it had nothing to do with that. That wasn't the prize. I didn't get that. I eventually became a person for whom that wasn't even a need anymore. You know?
Yeah. I see that a lot. I've certainly wrestled with that myself, you know, places where my ego hijacks my calling, and I have some
Jesus
apply to the calling.
Dude.
ooh, here's how it's going to be, and this is what my life is going to look like when I answer that call. And
yeah,
it's kind of like God sitting there going, well,
that's what it takes. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing that I talk to my spiritual director and my boyfriend about a lot, is that it is very tricky when your work is kind of tapping into some spirit stuff, laying it down for people. People are like transformed by it. That's all true. And my ego's wrapped up in every fucking step. Like, it's not all one or the other. It is very tricky. Like, I would be lying if I came here and said, I just want to serve the Lord. Anything that serves God and God's people, just send me, Lord. No, man. Like, I love that I get to tap into something and I get to express it, and then it's transformative or meaningful for people. Unbelievable. And I'd be lying if I didn't say my ego gets tangled up in every part of it. And I try to really, really, really watch it, but it's always there, trying to pretend it's something else, it's very hard. And then I'll find myself. So while my public career started by all these things kind of happening to me, it wasn't like, because I didn't vision board this shit on the first day of the year with my girlfriends and then figure out what, affirmations I need to tell myself to manifest. None of that. You just have to trust me. That was not it. Okay. So even though my career got started and then built not in that way, I'd be totally lying if I didn't say, well, now I want more. Now I'm like, well, what will help my platform? Or how can I end up getting on this person's podcast? Because that would really help build. Now, I want to help build my platform because I think there are people out there who don't know who I am, who for some reason, the way I articulate this shit could be really helpful for them. And if they don't know who I am yet, I want them to hear this message if it could be useful. That is true. What is also true is that you get a bigger platform. When I was on Dax Shepard's podcast, I suddenly had 40,000 new Instagram followers in a couple months, right? And so then that might lead to opportunities where I get a hobnob with some celebrities I haven't met yet. And people I think are cool, be impressed by me. And fuck, I'll get more money. There's no purity to be had. Yeah. We just have to try and be as honest as we can about those shadowy little thoughts of ours, because if we're not, they don't go away. They just lift weights in the corner, Yeah.
When I started, my biggest fear in doing my work is like, oh shit, if I really go for this, it could blow up, and I will just have the biggest bloated ego in the world. And I'll be at the top of the mountain, and then it would crash and burn, and I will be all alone. Right?
Yeah.
That was like,
yeah, totally.
I don't want it. I sat my spiritual teacher and my best friend down separate occasions and was like, I need your promise.
Yeah.
If you see me losing my shit,
yes,
it's all going, you need to call me on it.
Totally.
And the biggest blessing, my best friend overheard just a snippet of a conversation out of context and pulled me aside and was like, hey, I don't know what that was about. And once I shared the context, we were cool, but I was like, thank God.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I want to get into a bit of theology. There is a piece that you speak on that I adore. And you speak about it in a very different way than I do. Anyway, it's about our jagged edges. Our jagged edges.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working with people around their message and around knowing who their audience is, I talk about wound bonding. There are these underlying patterns that connect us. that we can't really see, but are part of our wounding, are part of our journey.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard you start talking about, well, not
Mm.
when I started to hear you talk about jagged edges,
Yeah.
that it's not our piety, not our smoothness that connects us to people, but like the nuance and texture of who we are that allows people to grab onto something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Creates connection. I was like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering, where did you lean into that? Because that's a big part of what I hear you speaking about. And
Yeah. Probably, I've been in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for 29 and a half years. So I probably heard something there. I mean, you don't get a seat in those rooms by being successful. You don't get a seat in those rooms by everything working out well for you. Yeah. The only way to get a seat in that room is by fucking it up, by nearly losing everything, by being what they call a pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. So and it's interesting. I think Richard Rohr talks about this, that one of the most success, America is all about achievement and pride and success and manifestation and all of that glory. And yet one of the most successful organizations that is native to the United States of America, the basis of belonging is failure. I mean, Richard Rohr calls the 12 steps America's single yet very important contribution to human spirituality. So I think it's that I saw the way when fellow alcoholics talk about stuff, that outside of those rooms, people would be horrified to share about their own lives, that outside those rooms, nobody would laugh when you told that story, right? That the bonding that happens, the fellowship that happens between people, the affection that's developed between people by sharing these horrible stories that end up being very funny often, or sometimes poignant, that are the exact type of stories that people outside those rooms would do anything they could to stay hidden. And yet that's the thing that's connecting us. And I think I probably experienced it there, I'm like, look, why is it that like people are speaking honestly about their lives and connecting to God and to one another so much more often in the basements of our churches than in the sanctuaries of our churches?
Yes. Yeah. I find it fascinating. When I was preparing for this conversation, one of the things I was like, kind of had to wonder about was the degree to which your teaching is so confessional, right? The way most of us go through life is trying to hide our foibles, how to brush, let's not show that part of ourselves, let's not talk about that. And that so much of what I think our fantasy is about success is hiding all of that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, as you said, it's what binds us. It's what connects us. What's it been like? What drives you to share so honestly? Because, you'll talk about like, I was watching a video of yours where you're talking about getting pissed off that the people in the labyrinth aren't walking fast enough, damn it.
Oh yeah, those people are awful. Yeah.
Which is
I'll
true.
tell you, no, they're horrible. I get road rage. I'm like, look, people are trying to pray behind you. Speed it the fuck up, man. No one's impressed by how into this you are. Yeah. Okay, I will tell you why I do that. It is just basically supply and demand. Because it's all I have to offer. Like if I had just so many stories about my virtues that I could offer to people, maybe I would do that. But I ever more confession. I mean, I struggle with the shit that other people struggle with. I don't, I think that the age of having spiritual leaders who are these blazing examples of perfected piety and spiritual achievement and transcendence and enlightenment. Look, we've seen enough documentaries to know those people are full of shit. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, watch any cult documentary or follow the news enough about a megachurch leader, and you'll realize there is no Wizard of Oz. There's only scared little men behind curtains pretending to be big. And so, as a quote spiritual leader, I just go, "Oh yeah, I'm scared, and I feel little, and I don't know what I'm doing." And then people are like, "Oh my God, that's so refreshing. What do you have to teach us?" like they just relax and kind of go, "Oh, we don't have to pull curtains behind. Like there's nothing to see." Like at one point when I kept getting invited to speak places and on stages with people whose books I'd read and stuff, I kind of went, it'll end soon. Someone will write an expose about me and then it'll be over, And my friends were like, "You read an expose about, what's your fucking memoir? What else is there?" I'm like, "Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, there's not really much else to
Yeah. Yeah. What occurs to me as you're talking, Nadia, is I find my body settling.
Yeah. Yes. Lovely. That's beautiful. Yes. Yes. I love that. Yeah.
A lot of the folks you serve and a lot of folks I serve have a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And the trauma stored in issues are in the tissues, right? The trauma stored in the body. And so a lot of folks, especially folks that are called to do unique work in the world.
Yeah.
We didn't always have an easy life, and it's part of our training, but it also means our bodies are often hyper alert.
Yeah.
And we don't get a chance to go,
okay, oh yeah.
I can be in relationship with you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Feel when you share that way. It's
that's lovely. Yeah.
And it just opens me up to relationship, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Yeah.
Did you know, so you shared a little bit about starting House for All. Did you know when you started it, like you talked about setting up from the beginning that you would depart? Did you know when you started, this is not going to be a forever gig for me?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
How did you know that?
Well, it's just my nature to kind of really burn bright and fast in something and then move on a bit. Like I get new ideas. I'm an entrepreneur, I think, on some level, just like in a cellular level. I love starting new stuff, creating new things, getting them going. And I knew I wasn't going to be there forever. And that I just kept saying, look, at some point, you guys are going to need a pastor with a different set of skills than I have. And like, I just hope that we all come to that realization approximately the same time. I don't want to stay a year after you guys have been like, "Oh man, it's time for her to move on." And I don't want to shock you by going, "I'm moving on," and have you go, "Oh no," it was. So we lucked out with that, I think.
And when it was time for you to go, was that like yep, I know it, it's time? How did you know?
Yeah, what's crazy about that story is that if you had asked me 2 months before I told them I was resigning, "Do you think you'll be leaving House soon?" I would have said no. So it wasn't like I knew for a long time it was coming up. I knew that there were parts of the job that were feeling more and more difficult instead of more and more easy. And there were several factors going on. I'll just be very honest. One, me being some C-list celebrity out in the world, it's a little church and it's very intimate. And, we had a lot of tourism. There was a ton of tourism. And like when people are visitors and they're there to worship with the community, amazing. We love that. Like we're not even us without having strangers around, right? Great. But it was very clear when people came, they wanted to get selfies. I'd stand up at the altar to preside at the sacrament. They'd take a picture. They wanted me to sign my books. They would leave after the sermon. It was very clear that it was tourism and it was about me. That wore me down a lot. Yeah. I resented it. And because those moments on Sunday are precious, to be like, hey, how'd your mom's surgery go? I'm a pastor, and people felt very entitled to my attention because they were visiting from Iowa and read my book. I'm like, there's 30 other people here visiting from Iowa who read my book, and they felt entitled to my attention. And that I began to not know how to be gracious about. And then, so that had an effect on me in the church. The other thing is, there were certain aspects of the job I was not innately good at, but that now it feels a little woo-woo to say this, but it felt like,
oh no,
I had divine provision to be able to do it. So what I mean is that I think that God wants God's people to be welcomed. And so what happened was I had the capacity to show interest in all the new people that were there all the time, not the tourists, but all the new people, and to ask them about themselves and to welcome them and to get them connected with other people. You have to trust me when I say that didn't come from me. I don't buy my self-care, but I had it. I wasn't faking it. And so to me, that was saying, oh, I got hooked up by the Spirit to do this work. And it was spring 3 years ago. We're at the spring retreat and there were 20 people I didn't recognize. And for the first time in 11 years, I looked at them and I thought, I don't want to ask them about themselves. I don't want to go and get them connected and welcome them. And then I went, oh, there it is. That's the sign. Okay. Like, if it's not there, that was my sign that it was time. Like, if I'd have stayed much longer after that, it just wouldn't have been good for anyone. I can't fake it. Yeah.
I've never thought of it this way about divine provision, which means I'm hooked up to be able to do something for a period of time.
Yeah.
And then when the hookup gets unhooked.
Yes.
All right.
Right.
With whatever job that divine provision required.
Yep. I've watched 2 TED Talks my whole life.
Yeah.
One was Liz Gilbert's. And it was between the time I had written Pastrix, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for like 1 week, right? But fluke, like in my world, that doesn't happen. And people, it was this surprise breakout hit thing, And then and Krista Tippett had me on Being. It was just crazy, right? Well, then I was on the hook to write a second. I told all my best stories from a 10-year period of my life in one book, and I had 18 months to write another one. I was like, I'm screwed, right? Yeah. And I had such a head trip thinking people are going to be embarrassed for me. This is a humiliation. I can't do it. What was I thinking? Everybody's expectations are too high. I can only disappoint. And somebody I can't remember in my life said, you need to watch this. And her whole thing about why do we call people geniuses? Because that word used to mean it was a spirit that visited somebody for them to do this incredible work. And it would often, and you're so grateful for that. And that genius moves on.
Yeah.
It's not an ontological reality for the person that then they have to live up to their whole lives, Yeah. And I just cried when I saw that.
What a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you write the second one then?
I have no idea. I mean, the weirdest thing was, I just kept kind of chipping away at it and being like, well, I have this story, and then things would happen and I'd write them in real time and be like, oh, I got to sit there. Maybe this would work. Yeah. I had no confidence, but I had a great editor. And then suddenly she goes, I think it's done. And I'm like, what? Wait, hold on. What? Yeah. And it was by far my most popular book, Accidental Saints. Yeah. Exponentially. Yeah. And it just in a weird way happened. So I don't know.
It reminded me a bit of Gregor Boyle's books, whole stories about him and the homies.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And like, oh, and with such humility and grace.
Yeah.
And to me, there's a place in all of us, I think, that is hoping, searching, longing for a welcome.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
And
Mm.
and that book, just that central idea of like that we're all welcome.
Mm. Yeah.
And that we don't have to look the part.
Yeah.
To be welcomed and to be used. And to me, that is such a universal need for us to know and to hear.
Yeah.
And your voice brings a certain tenor to that idea and to that topic.
I will also say, if the story that I tell myself about myself in the world every day of my life is, I don't fit anywhere. Nobody wants me. I'm not welcome. No, I don't get to be a part of things. It does not matter how welcoming a community is. You will find reasons to feel that.
Yep.
You will find reasons to, if you don't do your work and realize this is a fucking story I've told myself, is it even true? Like, it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy your whole life.
You're talking about my 20s.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own things. I was just talking to my friend Gareth Higgins today, and about, like, I have these deeply worn neural grooves. I have these thoughts that maybe came from some trauma or whatever. A lot of times they do, but that as soon as I think that thought in a situation, I know I'm in a bad place. And now I try to recognize them and go, oh, like one of mine is, nobody else has my back. I'm all alone. Nobody else is watching out for me. I have to be diligent about protecting myself at every turn, right? That is an old message. But the thing is because that's one of my things, I create situations in which it's true.
Not the truth. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a little story for you. I was standing in line outside the Castro Theater. This is probably 15 years ago. I lived in San Francisco. I went to MCC with Penny Nixon, if you know Penny. Oh God, thank God.
Aw, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in a Assemblies of God megachurch as a gay kid in Michigan.
Bless you.
There's my setup, right?
Bless you. Yes.
I just sat in the balcony of that church for a good 5 years and moved to San Francisco, just bawling and not even knowing why I was crying.
Yeah.
But I was outside. I was standing in line in the Castro Theater for a documentary of Terrence McNally's Corpus Christi. Which is a setting of the Passion of Jesus Christ. It's set in the 50s in Corpus Christi, Texas, and Jesus is gay. And it's a documentary about the acting troupe who toured the play for 8 years, right? And toured it in the South and, had death threats and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's at the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. So we're all lined up down the street on Castro, waiting in line for this film, and I look up and down and I just see all these dilapidated gays and lesbians, just people who've been put through the ringer of life.
Yeah.
And I had this thought: am I in this line again? Metaphorically, right? Am I revisiting this story, right? Of me as a gay kid growing up this way. And as soon as I had the thought, God said to me, Jeffrey, don't you think that every time you revisit this, that there's something more for you to learn.
Mm.
That there's another aspect of you that you haven't welcomed home.
Jeez.
Yeah, this happens to be the well that you keep dipping into, but every time you dip into it, you get a gift. Why would you want to get rid of it? That's kicking a gift horse in the mouth, right?
Oh, wow.
This happens to be your well. Everybody has one. This happens to be yours. And it just gave me this peace around that place of like, oh, I'm here again.
Oh, that's so good, because when I get here again, I berate myself. Like, thought I fucking learned this lesson. What is wrong with you? You're never going to get this right. Why does this keep happening? Like, what is so broken with you? You can't avoid that pothole when it's in the street every single time you walk down it.
Yeah. That piece, like,
that's beautiful.
Maybe there's an aspect of the gift you haven't yet received.
Oh, I have to think.
I know. But I will say that when I go, okay, if this isn't a problem, but there's a gift for me here, I can encounter it a little differently.
Of course. Yeah.
Instead of kicking and screaming, going like, okay, I'm not happy I'm here, but I'm willing to listen and learn. So, yeah. Tell me this, and then I'll just have a couple of final questions. Curious about the voice of God in your life, especially the places where you're like, shut the hell up, I don't want to hear it, not that. And how, like, because I find that most of the people I work with, they're called to stuff that they're not particularly happy about.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't have much of that, to be honest. I'm grateful for what I'm called to do. Like, I love it, and it's exciting for me. I mean, there's a million frustrations and pitfalls and terrors, but I don't. But I'm like, I kind of can't believe I get to do this. Like, I mean. So I don't have that exact experience. I spent the pandemic writing prayers every Sunday that I would post, and Sunday prayers. And I've never been like a prayer writer. I didn't aspire to be known for that. It just happened, and then I just kept showing up and doing it. And what I would do on Sundays is I would have my coffee, I'd do my little meditation. And then I would just sit with myself and be as still as I could, and as honest, and dig as honestly as I could into, what do I really, really want to say to God right now, given what I'm struggling with, given what's going on in the world. What is my actual most honest prayer? And then I wrote those, and then I'd post them, and I swear, it was just nuts that, like, almost every week people would be like, man, it's like you crawled inside my head, and like, you're putting words for stuff that's in there and I didn't have words for. Thank you. Or these are getting me through, or whatever it is, these comments. And I wasn't thinking what would help people. I truly was not thinking what would impress people. It was, what do I really struggle with right now? What is my most honest prayer? And then I just put it out there. And eventually I realized, and this feels like super circular, it felt like God was giving me words for my own most honest prayers.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it. Yeah. But that's what it felt like, because every week I was pretty sure it wouldn't happen. I'm fairly I'm fairly faithless when it comes down to it. So I was like, well, it's been a pretty good run, but it's probably over, and then I realized, I think God is even giving me the prayers that I need to pray to God. How weird, like, that's weird, right? So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I got this message, Jeffrey. So I have a business meeting with my business manager every morning, right? And
yeah. Wow, every morning.
Every morning, 8 a.m.
I don't even have a business manager. I have a boyfriend, like he does my QuickBooks, but I should get a business manager. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I need somebody to help keep me on task.
Yeah.
And I do these invocations. I do a prayer when we start our business meeting, and I listen, and there's often an image or a message or something to share.
Yeah.
And I got this message. For the month of January this year, invite people to join you. Right? So I called it a month of business prayer because I didn't know what the hell to call it. And it's one of those things where each morning I would show up 8 a.m., turn on Facebook Live and go, I hope to God something, is there going to be something here today?
Yeah.
And it's like, surely one of these days the well is going to dry up.
No, it's vulnerable. Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that place is, and what occurred to me about the other question is, I think that the people that are kicking and screaming go, I don't want it. It's because they haven't done it yet. This is my guess, perhaps. And that once you actually start doing it, if you're honest in it, you're like, oh, wow, I get to do it.
And maybe sometimes it's that I don't feel right about admitting I do want to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
So it feels better to say I don't. And then other people can talk me into the thing I actually kind of want anyway.
Yes. All right. Final five. First question. When you're in it, you're just in it, and it doesn't feel like there's any way out, what's one thing you do to move forward?
What do you mean in it? Like in a bad place?
Yep.
Oh, boy. I can't get through anything without talking about it with my friends. So I'm just wired that way. I'm a verbal processor. And so if something hard happens or I'm having a lot of feelings, I have to call my girlfriends. Like I have to talk to someone. That's me. That's how I figure out what I'm feeling, by talking about it. So, because sometimes just feeling it is too much. My feelings are so intense and so immediate that I have to talk about them to kind of put them in their place a bit. Yep.
Get them out of you.
Yeah. And to go, oh, here's what this is. It's okay. It's not going to consume me,
Yeah. Good. Faith to you is?
I don't like this answer because I don't feel like it helps people, but innate. It's just so innate to me. It's not, I don't strive for it. I don't try to get more. I could not be an atheist to save my life. And it's not because I did something right or because I'm so devoted to my morning time with the Lord. It's just encoded in my being, I don't know why.
Something that truly feeds your soul.
Just like hanging out, just spending time with my beloved. I am like truly well loved for the first time in my life at 52, and I couldn't be. It's changed me.
I see it in your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, legit. Yeah.
Beautiful. Last question. What's one thing you wish everybody knew?
American cheese is not actual cheese.
Yep. Neither is white chocolate.
Exactly.
That is awesome. Nadia, thank you.
Yeah, it's fun.
Thanks for your gift in this world. Thanks for your time. This has been really great.
My pleasure.
So you've got a show, The Confessional. We can find it at nadiabolzweber.com/podcast.
Yeah, anywhere you get your podcasts. I produce with The Moth in conjunction with The Moth.
Which is that's my partner and I's road road trip companion is the mom.
Yeah.
Hours on end.
Totally. Yeah.
And everything else can be found at Nadia Bolz-Weber, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. I have like a Substack thing called The Corners. I just started, I launched a social network last week called The Chapel, which is in beta. So it's just with a pilot group of 500 people, but I'll be opening that up to folks soon. It's called a experimental gathering of spiritual misfits. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I'll be promoting that soon. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, my dear. This is
no problem.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, super fun.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, be well. Bye.
Hey there, thanks so much for listening in. If this conversation was powerful, if it stirred your soul or inspired your journey, then be sure to share it with a friend. Just copy and paste the link wherever you're listening to this podcast and text that link right now to a friend that you think would be inspired by this episode. And if this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review so I can get to know you and your thoughts better. To learn more about the work I do with emerging and established paradigm changers, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next episode.